Okay, so we have our cardiac muscle. Now it would go all the way to threshold on its own too, right? Because it still has open sodium channels. So if all cardiac cells have open sodium channels, why is the SA node the pacemaker? Because they're technically all their own, they can be their own pacemaker. So why is the SA node the pacemaker?
Something about it's faster.
Yeah, it's faster. So it depolarizes, it gets to threshold sooner than all the others. Because once it gets a threshold, you know, it sends out its action potential and all the other cells contract, so they have to start over every time. And the SA node starts over with it, but it has a shorter refractory period. It's gonna get to threshold sooner than all the others. Okay? So this cell could do it all on its own, but typically the SA node beats it and jumps in somewhere, and you don't have to worry about that too much. But anyway, the SA node jumps in and brings it to threshold sooner. Okay, so what happens at threshold in cardiac muscle? Why do we depolarize?
Calcium channels?
Sort of.
Sodium channels?
Sodium channels. So voltage-gated sodium channels open wide up. Voltage-gated calcium channels start to open, but they're not open yet. And voltage-gated potassium channels are closed. Okay. So then we get up here, then what happens? So right here we had voltage-gated sodium open, voltage-gated calcium start to open, and potassium closed.
Can you draw which way it's going in or out of the cell wise?
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. So if this is our cell over here, so at threshold we have voltage-gated sodium that opened. Sodium's rushing in. We have voltage-gated calcium that started to open, but it's not open yet. And then we have voltage-gated potassium that closed. So that's where we are right now. Okay? So then what happens at the top of depolarization?
Sodium channels closed, potassium open.
Good, so sodium channels close. So we stop, right? We don't go up anymore. And then the potassium channels are going to open. So we start to drop down a little bit. Okay, so then what happens?
Then the calcium channels open, which causes that plateau.
Good. So then calcium channels open up, and basically the amount of calcium coming in is equal to the amount of potassium that's going out. And so we get that plateau, just like you said. So from here to here was like 2 milliseconds. This plateau lasts 500 milliseconds, a full half a second. So if I was to actually draw this all out, I'd come around the room and come back to it.
Do we need to know that?
It's good to know that it takes a while. Why does that plateau last for so long? What's the point of that?
To give time for the other cells to kind of catch up.
Exactly, because we're not traveling through nerves anymore. Now we're just spreading from muscle to muscle, beat through those gap junctions. And so that gives us enough time to make sure that that positive charge gets through to depolarize the rest of the cells. We don't want only half to depolarize, because then our heart gets out of rhythm and gets out of whack. They don't all work together. So we want to make sure they all have enough time to get triggered. That makes sense? Okay, so then we have, so instead of drawing all the way around the room, we just draw this break. So then what happens?
Voltage gated calcium channels close, and the potassium channels open.
Good. So our calcium channels close now. So as they start to close, potassium's still open, we get a drop back down. So if acetylcholine is here, so there's our resting membrane potential. Again, we don't really call it that because we're not actually resting, but if acetylcholine was there, we would drop down farther. If epinephrine was there, we wouldn't drop down as far. That makes sense. So when we repolarize, we'll either go normal or not as far, or hyperpolarize, depending on what hormones and neurotransmitters are there. We good with this? Good deal. Any questions about that? I feel like I'm a little more of a zombie today than normal. It's a 3-day weekend, man. It kills you. It's awesome. But then you come back feeling like you come back more tired than if it would have been a normal weekend. Okay. That's not fair. You can't do that to me. You're definitely going to be the example for every scenario now. You were already.
Yeah. Nothing's changed.
All right. Okay, so let's talk real quick about blood pressure. Like I said, we won't go real deep into it because next chapter, that's a big part of what we're going to talk about.
So I have a question really quick that kind of goes on with what you were saying.
Okay.
It says, how is the exponential propagated from one cardiac cell to the next? Is that just due to gap junctions? Is that what's it?
Bingo. Yep. So those positive ions, so one cell depolarizes. We have so these are our cardiac cells. We have our branched fibers, intercalated discs, gap junctions. So if this cell depolarizes, sodium comes in. Those positive ions leak over to this one, which sends more. So voltage gated channels open here, over to here, and it just goes all the way through.
Well, that's all we need to know here.